Okay, the talking points about the oil and gas decision in 8 minutes. 1. The decision was hasty and rushed. 2. The government ignored its own advisers. 3. It will cost the country huge sums of money. 4. Emissions will go up as a result. 5. It will ruin the economy by creating sovereign risk. And 6. We'll face an energy crisis. You've probably heard a few of these by now, and I'm about to explain why each is very complex, containing a tiny nugget of fact, wrapped in enough guano to make Nauru livable again. Firstly, was it hasty and rushed, and was no one warned? Well, it turns out the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment knew about the decision 3 months before it was made. There were lots of internal discussions that were released under the OIA, and you can read about the whole thing here. Of course, the oil industry knew much earlier. They knew in the 70s that what they were doing wasn't sustainable, and they've used PR tactics to delay everything for 30 years. They're the reason things are precarious now, so screw them. For those in the middle, the local mayors and councillors and the many businesses, big and small, that rely on the oil industry, this was likely more of a surprise. We've all known the deal about fossil fuel for 30 years, and the people voted for politicians that vowed to take it seriously, so you had to expect something. And here's the last point. This line is the amount of carbon we can expect to burn before completely screwing ourselves. How much carbon do you think has already been discovered? This much? Or maybe this much? Well, it was this much in 2011. And in 2012, $675 billion went into searching for more. We're still exploring here in New Zealand, and we plan to for years to come. And so the harsh and different realities of the physical universe are asked to wait a bit longer, in a language that it clearly doesn't recognise. Next, the government ignored the advice of its own department. Now let's be more clear about this. The government didn't do everything they were told to do by the getting rich from oil branch of the Ministry for helping out business. We asked a panel of other governmental advisers what they thought about this, from the Ministry of not wasting stuff as much to the schools of how we got so screwed in the first place and the Parliamentary Commission for not laying everything to waste. They said this. What the hell did they just... Which I think means they've ignored us for years. What's your point? Anyway, let's put aside the obvious talking point, climate change is real and none of this is matter, and head straight to some of the others. The first is that MB reported it would cost lots of money. How much? A few $100 million. What? Sorry, $50 billion. So why was that range so wide? Because the MB economists wanted to make it look big, so they dropped the discount rate and assumed a low carbon price. But they didn't want to look dumb, so they included it as well. We should be laughing at this tactic, but it worked. Here's a submission that shows the right numbers of the teeny tiny ones, and he points out that this is first year stuff. Okay, what about this one where you stop exploring for gas and emissions go up? Firstly, and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills now, digging up carbon and burning it is what makes emissions go up. This is like saying guns don't kill people, they suck bullets out of people and make them better. And the subtext here is that other forms of fossil fuels like bunker fuels and shipping, coal in power stations or tar sand extractions in Alaska emit more carbon than good old fracked Taranaki gas. But that fracked gas leaks carbon into the air in huge quantities that we're only starting to measure, mostly from old abandoned wells and failing infrastructure that no one wants to be responsible for. Also, we can't trade meaningfully in emissions the way you'd need to get this right because the industry stopped us from fixing a meaningful price on carbon. And lastly, this argument was laid out in 4.5 pages in the back of an MB paper in February. There are no numbers to support it because there can't be. All countries are bound by the Paris Accord to reduce emissions independently and not run the line that we get to eat all the biscuits because some other kid wants to eat them too. There aren't infinite biscuits, and they're mostly gone anyway. Now let's talk about sovereign risk. This is a measure of the confidence that investors have in a nation. Will it honour its debts? Is it headed into political or economic issues that make it too risky to deal with? Certainly, if you're in the oil exploration or extraction business, you might feel that way about New Zealand now. But who cares? Every nation in the world has to break their dysfunctional relationship with these industries, and no one looks good kicking out a toxic flatmate. But the investment the country needs is the type that builds new energy economies, moving in to claim that master bedroom. So If you're finding this analogy a bit glib, take a look at this paper by Standard & Poor's, one of the top 3 credit rating agencies. It's called Climate Change is a Global Megatrend for Sovereign Risk. They say that assuming extreme frequent and destructive weather events are on the rise, the effect on sovereign risk needs to be considered. They wrote that in 2014. Before Irma, Harvey or Maria, before Rupert Murdoch's house went up in flames along with swathes of California. So you can bet they're considering it now. The last argument is about energy security. It goes that if we don't keep gas for power, we'll run into trouble as we try and electrify everything from cars to milk plants. What do, it says, with all of that wind and solar when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow? Be nice just to burn lots of gas in Huntley or some brand new peaker plants around Taranaki. In a world where global warming is the narrative to a movie you don't have to watch, that's fine. Or you could do wind and solar like everyone else, while realizing that energy can be generated and stored in so many inexpensive ways it's kind of embarrassing now. Even the sweet, sweet returns of selling your children's future fail to compete with the subsidized end of time we currently set our clocks by. Oh, and hydrogen. After blocking their ears to climate science for decades, the gas pundits are trying to steal a march on the first element of the periodic table. This is a business case based on importing devices from the Northern Hemisphere, using them to bottle sunlight, and then shipping the bottles back to them. Genius. Only 2 things stand in its way. A copyright infringement case from the underpants gnomes and the generally even distribution of daylight around the globe. That's right, NBR. The sun is a socialist. All I can say with the last few seconds is that there are ways to solve these problems, especially here in New Zealand. Each talking point raises issues that could go on for hours, especially this one, and every article I've seen using them toss it out with a sentence like it should be common wisdom. It's not. This problem implicates all of us across generations, and yet we can't seem to see it clearly, no matter what we do. It's like colonialism, but with no clear winners. Time's up. Click to the article to get more details, head to the podcast to hear a discussion with environmental lawyer Tom Bennion about the amendment, or go to the Environment Select Committee's Facebook page to see the live and written submissions. This is an important moment for us, so thanks to Deborah Russell and the team for making it open and putting it online. Now a word from Greta.
Olen kuololakossa ilmaston puolesta. Some people say that we should be in school instead. Some people say that we should study to become climate scientists so that we can solve the climate crisis. But the climate crisis has already been solved. We already have the facts and the solutions. All we have to do is wake up and change. And why should we be studying for a future that soon will be no more, when no one is doing anything whatsoever to save that future? And what is the point of learning facts within the school system when the most important facts, given by the fine science of that same school system, clearly means nothing to our politicians and our society? Today, we use 100 million barrels of oil every day. There are no politics to change that. There are no rules to keep that oil in the ground. So we can't save the world by playing by the rules, because the rules have to change. Everything needs to change, and it has to start today. This is a cry for help. To all the newspapers who have never treated the crisis as a crisis. To all the politicians that pretend to take the climate question seriously. To all of you who know but choose to look the other way every day because you seem more frightened of the changes that can prevent a catastrophic climate change than the catastrophic climate change itself. Your silence is almost worst of all. The future of all the coming generations rests on your shoulders. What you do now, we children can't undo in the future. So please treat the crisis as the crisis it is and give us a future. Our lives are in your hands. Thank you.